and welcome to another edition of Hard Copy, the program where we bring you the people behind the news. I'm Maokwe Ogun. Since the first edition of this program, Hard Copy has focused on the conflict between farmers and herdsmen. We've done so because it's one threat that has the capability of morphing into something even more dangerous if governments at all levels do not address it frontally. Of this week, it does seem there's positive news from the federal government as the Minister of Interior has constituted a 16-man committee to look into the conflict between farmers and herdsmen. The major objective of the committee is this: to draw up a roadmap for an all-inclusive gathering of stakeholders to address the lingering conflict between pastoralists and sedentary farmers. It will be headed by Professor Oshita, who is the Director General of the Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution, the IPCR. Now, at the National Assembly, the Senate has also stepped down 3 bills which propose grazing reserves and ranches as a solution to the conflict. The lawmakers say they lack the constitutional authority to legislate on the issues as it falls in the residual list. Before now, I had spoken with the former chairman of the National Human Rights Commission, Professor Odinkalu, to get his perspective on the conflict. And he had quite a lot to share on the matter, not only on the conflict, but also on the DSS raid on the home of judges and the fight against corruption. But not before he let me into one little trivia, that he always wanted to be a journalist, but his father's choice had led him in the direction of law. This was his response when I asked him if he had any regrets.
No. The only regret is, I guess, if to the extent that there is any, is that I lost out to my dad on that one. But no, seriously, my first choice was always journalism.
You've written some articles. I mean, whether or not you like it, you're still making use of the pen. And one of the articles you recently wrote, something about history lessons on doing the right thing the wrong way, which is an article on the recent DSS raid on the home of judges. And you said there is a great deal of information, but very little knowledge. What is the body of knowledge you think is missing in this entire discourse on the DSS raid on judges' homes?
There's a sense of deja vu for those of us who are now old, and begin to think of myself as old in this digital information age. The facility of things kids can do, 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds can do with information is breathtaking. But in many ways, it's like in the world of intelligence. You've got signals intelligence, or what they call SIGINT, and you've got human intelligence, or HUMINT, right? Now, you can collect all the signals in the world, but you need a framework to be able to analyze it, to make sense of it. And if you don't have the human intelligence and the analytical capabilities, you're not going to be able to make much of signals intelligence. It's the same thing. President Buhari was created by a lot of kids who had no memory of 1984-85. And no sense of history. And so the sense of something radical is happening, something great is happening is there. And yet, and part of what I tried to do in that article is basically tell the story of how Nigeria's government since 1960, I could easily have gone back to Tafawa Balewa in 1958, but Nigeria's government since independence has been defined by 2 things. Or maybe 3. 1, state creation. 2, the focus on corruption, fighting corruption. And the 3rd is the sense of transition to civil rule. Now, every military government, bar none, from Aguirre, promised some form of transition to civil rule as a justification for its existence and its tenure. Now, because we are now in civil rule, that's no longer there. And so you've got the defining thing now has been, with every administration, fighting corruption. And they do it in different ways, they make different noises about it, but from 1966, when it was 10%, now we are in a place where people take 100% of the contracts and deliver nothing, and corruption has got worse. We've not fought it the right way, and not fought it with a focus, and we've not fought it with a focus on creating institutions and processes. What have we done? We've focused on creating strong men who are going to terrorize us with their body language and tell us what to do and get us flogged. And after flogging all of us, what happens? Things get worse. Every part of the Nigerian state, bar none, has got worse. And I don't think getting DSS to go break the doors of judges at night will make corruption go away. It won't.
Well, when you look at the fact that, it's gotten worse, as you rightly chronicled in your article, from 10%, you say that now we're at 100%, as it were. Now, the president has an advisory team against corruption. They believe that corruption has gotten so radical that the approach to fight it must also be radical.
Must become unlawful.
You don't agree?
What is radical? That's the question. We can, as Nigerians, we have our way with words, and it's great to listen to Nigerians talk about these things. But what is radical? That's the question.
What is radical? But then there's also a question of what is the rule of law?
I don't think the problem is radical or not radical. The problem is the normalization of the abnormal. We have not really routinized fighting corruption. Now, and so what have we done? What should be the biggest anti-corruption agencies in Nigeria? Number one, the bureaucracy, civil service. Because you need to have preventative mechanisms. You've got to have a civil service that prevents corruption. But the civil service has become the mechanism by which we promote corruption. That's why we are running a fiscal deficit. We're borrowing to finance our government overheads. Okay? Number two, the police. But no, everybody thinks the police is the most corrupt institution in the country. And instead of trying to build up the police and transform it into something that should help us fight corruption, what do? We cannibalize it. So we've created EFCC, and the EFCC chair, executive vice chair, as a matter of law, must be a police commissioner of a particular, must be at least police commissioner level. Yes? We've created ICPC, we have Code of Conduct Tribunal, we've got Code of Conduct Bureau, we've got all these extraordinary, and now we've got DSS. All of them are beating down on people's doors, and corruption is getting worse. Does it not strike, we've got Tuga, of course, does it not strike you that something is wrong? There is inefficiency, we are creating jobs around corruption, and corruption is growing. That must tell us we are not doing something right. The police, when was the last time the police ever prosecuted a case of corruption? That's the problem. And we're transferring resources that we should be investing in creating a police force that works, a police service that works, to creating extraordinary institutions. Now, our police is poorly funded, but somehow EFCC gets money, NDLEA gets money, ICPC gets money, Tuga gets money, Code of Conduct Tribunal is trying the Senate President. All of these things are happening, the attention is focused on them. Everybody forgets that there is a Nigeria police force, and we have a duty to make it work.
Okay, let's quickly switch attention now to the farmers and herdsmen. We heard Afenifere, the Yoruba social political group, talking about, taking the threat of Miyetti Allah, or taking their complaints to the federal government as a threat, a terror threat. They have categorized it because only recently Miyetti Allah claimed that, what was going on in Ekiti State was targeted against them in the wake of the new law on cattle grazing in Ekiti State was targeted against them. At least that was how they felt. And they are calling on the federal government to intervene. What do you make of what exactly is going on between farmers and herdsmen?
The interesting thing is this. Afenifere is not an organization of farmers. Is it? And Miyetti Allah is not exactly, yes, it's called MACBAN, Miyetti Allah Cattle Breeders Association of Nigeria. But they're cattle breeders, not cattle herders. Right? Now, the one thing that has happened is this is a livelihood conflict. It's been taken over by ethnic merchants because of a vacuum of governmental responsibility and response. And I do think that the interventions by the expropriation of the issues around this particular tragic thing by the merchants of ethnic narrowness needs to be checked. And if we can check that, the reality is we've got to recognize government has not done good about this. And it started off as indigenous settler issues in the Middle Belt, and it snowballed. It used to be in the urban areas, it's expanded into the rural areas, and it's become clearly a livelihood issue. But the livelihood issue is taking so many lives that the Heidelberg Institute in Germany, since 2014, has said that there are two wars in Nigeria. One is in the northeast with Boko Haram. The other is in the savannah of Nigeria. That's the farmer-herder conflict. And what is a war? A war is a conflict that results in a minimum of 1,000 field casualties in a year, as in field deaths. And in the Middle Belt, right now, the conflict in the Middle Belt is producing more deaths. Or the savannah of Nigeria is producing more deaths than the conflict in the northeast, and has since last year. Now, in the face of that, what has government actually done? Very little. The most I've heard is that the president has directed the law enforcement agents to address this. But, and by the way, I can't understand why Afenifere and Mieti Allah are fighting over this. Mieti Allah is supposed to be an organization of Nigerian cattle breeders. And yet the allegation is that these people who are doing this are not supposed to be Nigerians. Somebody is not telling us the whole truth.
Now, because we did speak, I do recall that the Sunrise Daily team spoke with Governor El Rufai in August of this year, as 2016, and he said that this happened in the wake of the electoral violence in 2011, where some herdsmen were on their way back to their countries and they were engulfed in the 2011 post-election violence, and that subsequently, he said in Kaduna that over 800 people were said to have lost their lives in the wake of the post-election violence, and that on their way back, I think they were caught in it, and also their cattle as well. Subsequently, they found that these people came back, their relatives, as it were, from other countries, Senegal, Mali, Chad, Niger. According to him, they were able to make this discovery through a committee that was set up by the state government. I think it was headed by General Aguai, and that was what they were able to trace. And that they resolved to reaching out to these people who were aggrieved and try to see, how it was that they could compensate the farmers, or beg your pardon, the herdsmen, and see how they could put an end to the conflict. Because at the time we spoke to him, he said that they had recorded some results. But then when you look at what has happened in Kaduna in recent days, I mean, what's happened in Godo, for instance, there are big questions as to whether or not that has had an impact and whether that is all of the narrative to what exactly is becoming, an incessant clash between farmers and herdsmen.
I mean, I didn't listen to Governor Rufai, and I'm not going to lightly regard what he's said to have said. But even accepting all of that, that's probably a snippet of what happened. I've actually read the report of the Kaduna State Reconciliation Commission from 2011. I've also read the Sheikh Lemu report, which was the presidential panel on post-election violence. I'm not persuaded at all on any reading of those documents that they're framed by the cattle herder, the farmer herder situation, at least in the way that it is now. There is a historical tension in southern Kaduna, of course, part of which is subsistence, livelihood based, and captures some of that. But no, I'm not persuaded at all that it's got to do with these transnational situations or transboundary situations. But even if one were to accept that, however, the reality is that the field of conflict is much broader than southern Kaduna. Okay, there's a bigger field of conflict in just across the border down south into Plateau State.
Well, we take a break now. When we return, we will look at some of the solutions already proposed and the professor's perspective on them. Do join us again.